Hey, what's up, guys? It's Matt. Uh, so, at the end of my last video, I had talked about doing a recap of the Arizona Society of Respiratory Care student conference that we attended. So that was almost a week ago tomorrow. So last Friday. It was not a mandatory attendance thing for us. But basically our instructor, so my program requires 50 hours of what they call service learning. Community service type things, or volunteering pretty much for anything. So like volunteering for the American Lung Association's like Lung Force Walk. Locally we do a thing called Zoo Lights at the local zoo, where the respiratory care department from our school, we go and we volunteer, like hand out snacks and help direct people and things like that. So by the end of my program, I'm required to get 50 of these hours. Our teacher had basically made us a deal that if you do go to this conference, even though it's not really volunteering, he was going to give us credit for the time in conference, plus credit us for the drive up and back, because it was about like an hour and a half drive up to where the conference was. So naturally, it seemed like an easy way to pick up some hours. It did cost us like $25, but well worth it. Lunch was provided, and it was like an 8 to 4 conference. So what I've done is I've done a quick list. I lost the actual itinerary. I think I tossed the folder or something. But kind of what we did. So basically, where I lived to where it was is about an hour and a half or so, depending on traffic. The problem is the time that you would leave where I live. When you're getting up to the next big town, you're hitting a ton of traffic. It's like their daily traffic. So I live in the second largest city in my state. The conference was in the capital. So there's a lot more people, a lot more traffic. I left the house about 5 o'clock in the morning. So it actually took almost 2 hours, because I got to the location. It was actually at the home of one of the other schools programs. So there's only 5 programs in the state that teach respiratory care, and so it was at the college that teaches that one. So I got there right at like 7 o'clock in the morning. The conference started at 8. So some classmates of mine, I ran into each other in the parking lot. We're like, cool. Like we actually tried to find somewhere to go get coffee or something. We wound up at a McDonald's, because the college wasn't in the greatest part of the city. So after driving up, we all got settled in. Everybody kind of picks a seat. There was probably between 120 and 150 students, I want to say, there. It was in a large kind of auditorium, and it was fairly full. I think my college, between our first and second year students, I'm a first year student, and we have our second year students, I think we had the largest representation versus all the other schools, basically. But so basically, there was something after the lunch period where everyone kind of like cheered to represent who was still there basically by the afternoon. A lot of conferences, people thin out in the afternoon. I mean, admittedly, some of the people whose programs were at this college had class. So in their defense, they had class to go to. But so we all got settled in. We're all down. We all had our like name tags on and stuff. And of course, being a student conference, they decide, hey, what are we gonna do? We're gonna mix it up. So everybody had a folder with like the itineraries and some other things right in front of them. And they decided to say, okay, well, every folder has a sticker on it. You have to get up and find the table that matches that sticker. So there was these little like centerpieces on all the tables, and there were stickers. So obviously to force students to mingle with other students. I wound up actually at a table with like 4 second-year students from my program. So even though obviously like I don't spend a lot of time with the second-year students, like I knew who they were, they knew who I was. It wasn't as awkward for me, I guess. And so the very first presenter basically talked about all of the professional groups. So in a lot of my earlier videos, my first few videos, I did a lot of linking to like the AzSRC YouTube channel and things like that. So we basically covered what is AzSRC, what do they do for us, what is co-ARC and what do they do for us, what is the MBRC, what do they do for us, what is the BOE, which in our state is our Board of Examiners. And I'll get into that later because we actually had a guy who spoke to us from the Board of Examiners. Just to summarize it for you right now, they're the equivalent of the Board of Nursing for nurses to respiratory care. So it's the Board of Examiners of respiratory care. So that's what they do. We went to this presentation. We talked about what each organization basically does for us as students or us as future practitioners. So that was cool and all. It was a little, just I guess my personal opinion on this is, it was a little, how do I want to say it? I felt like they were selling it a little bit, promoting signing up for student memberships for AzSRC, the benefits it comes with. I don't know. I wasn't buying into it at the time. So, and in my opinion, I still don't buy into it. But that gets political, and I'm not going to get into that kind of stuff. So, moving on. So after the first presenter, we had a panel. So basically, there was a lot of respiratory therapists in varying degrees of things. So there was about 6 people, I want to say, in the panel, and they did everything from research to education to floor therapy to LTAC liaisons who were former like flight therapists. It was basically an example of how diversified you can be in respiratory therapy. Now that was pretty cool because after they all kind of they introduced themselves, did a brief summation of their history of respiratory care, and then it kind of went on to a Q&A, so people got to ask a lot of questions. And I thought that was pretty cool. It was probably one of my favorite parts of the whole thing because it was kind of like you can really see from an associate's program where everybody's getting their like associate applied science and they're all getting registered or whatever, and what you can do with advanced degrees or just whatever you desire. So, that was a pretty cool portion. Then we had 2 different presenters, but they did one on resume writing. So there were a lot of second year, basically students about to graduate, represented at the conference. And that was pretty cool to basically go over how to write a resume. But anyone who's been in college before, you've probably seen how to write a resume. If you ever held a job before, maybe this is like a career shift for you. You kind of know how to write a resume. But the presenter talked about the 3 different primary kinds of resume writing. What might be most beneficial for you, but why one who may not be beneficial for one person might be beneficial for another. So I thought that was really cool. And then she talked about like do's and don'ts and things. So like, independent of whatever format you choose, like should I do this? Should I do that? Some of it seems obvious, like don't list your high school diploma. Like it's assumed that you graduated high school to be doing this program kind of thing. When you should list your GPA, things like that. So I thought that was really cool too. Although the lady kind of admitted she's like, she had posted just an example of a book she'd bought off Amazon of like how to write your resume. And it's like, oh, okay. I mean, like, I guess you just buy a book or whatever. Then we also had a lady who presented on interviewing. Now, this is really cool, although I feel like it was a little obvious. I don't know if obvious is the right word. It was like these just grossly common sense things that you should do and don't do in an interview. Really, as either a new grad or like a seasoned practitioner. So it was things like, being overly casual, be it dress or attitude, going in questions that are good to ask. She was saying in her position as a hiring manager for the Cancer Treatment Centers of America, like, don't ask a manager like, oh, how long have you been doing what you do? Like, are you going to be doing that for a long time? Like, when can I possibly get your job, kind of thing? Like, I don't know, stuff I felt was pretty obvious. So the interview section, I wasn't as impressed by. At the same time, I've always felt like I'm a pretty good interviewer. I personally believe interviews fall. There's other parameters. I mean, like, unless you're like a terrible interviewer, I feel like there's other factors that really control whether you get hired on versus other people. It could be things like availability, like, obviously as a new grad therapist, you're probably like, yo, like 7 days a week, open availability kind of thing. Like, I want a job. I've been working my butt off for this. You can't be like, oh yeah, I can only work like 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. Can you make that work? Like, I mean, just, obviously if you have like terrible availability, you may not get hired over someone else, because sometimes it's like, we just need someone who's qualified to work. So I don't know. I've had a lot of experience with that too. So not to diverge too far. Okay. So then we had lunch, and so lunch was cool. It was catered. They were just pretty standard. It was like these really good sandwiches, chips, drinks, snacks, desserts, things like that. So I had a little break for lunch. So, and at that point, everything got a little more casual after lunch. So if you've ever been to a conference before, I feel like it's kind of a standard that things kind of like relax a little bit after lunch. Some people have to go. They can only attend like half day or something. Like I said, some students actually had classes to go to. So the presentation after lunch was an older couple, and the guy was a COPDer whose wife was his caregiver. And they were talking about, they were advocating for a caregiver. So, this will come into play, I guess, as a practitioner when you're dealing with people with chronic diseases. The caregiver status, so beyond the stuff that we're so focused on, the patient and their health, but in cases like COPD, and I imagine like cystic fibrosis is probably up there too, the caregivers, so be it a parent or guardian or spouse or any other family member who's taking care of this person, I mean, advocating for them. And so I had an appreciation for that spot. The guy was also a bilateral lung transplantee. I'm not going to get into the politics or the personal opinion side of a patient with COPD getting a bilateral lung transplant. Let's just say it was discussed, not during the presentation, but amongst ourselves. So, moving on from that. Afterwards, we talked to the guy. So we had a representative from the BOE. So a lot of us were like, is that Board of Education in that earlier bit? No, it's the Board of Examiners for short, but they're the Board of Examiners for Respiratory Care. So as I kind of said earlier, they are the equivalent of the Board of Nursing, but for respiratory care. Now this might vary state to state. So in my state, that's just what we call them, the BOE. They are the ones who set the requirements for the state to maintain like licensure. So nationally, there's like a requirement by AARC and the NBRC or whatever to maintain the license and registration with CEUs, things like that. Then there's also the BOE, which for us in our state has their own set of requirements, which is a little less than what you're required of, like every 2 years or whatever. Basically going over some changes, things like in our state, there's and this is just a recent thing apparently, but there's no such thing as a like temporary license. So when you first graduate school and maybe you haven't taken your boards yet, I guess in the past it was a thing to be like, okay, but you've already maybe interviewed, and they're like, well, you can go and start working, and you'll just technically be practicing under a license of another therapist, something like that. And apparently, whether that was or wasn't ever a real thing, it's been cracked down on now in my state. So now that's a big, like, absolute no-no. It is impossible. And basically, he was like, any hospital tells you, no, you can go ahead and work. You haven't passed your boards yet. That's okay. He said, you would absolutely be compromising yourself and the hospital. You would be practicing without a license. He said, we do no temporary license, nothing like that. As a student, we're covered. We are practicing on another practitioner's license or our instructor's license, but outside of a student capacity, you've already graduated, you're no longer technically a student. You would be practicing without a license, and any hospital tells you otherwise, in my state, is lying. So he went over stuff like that, and just, it was things like reporting, if you get in trouble. So you get a DUI or something like that, the prudent way to report things and stuff like that, just because you get in trouble doesn't mean you're necessarily going to lose your license or registration, but failing to report, it's even worse. So it was just stuff like that, pretty useful. It was probably the most practical part of the whole thing. So, and then finally, the last kind of 2 bits, we did a quick talk about the sputum bowl. So you've probably heard of this before. It's basically like Jeopardy, but it's like all about respiratory therapy knowledge. So every state has competitions, and the winner of the state competitions has an opportunity to go to a national competition. I heard it was in Vegas one year. I think it's in Indianapolis this year. Even if you're not good, it's supposed to be a lot of fun. It's a bunch of, again, it's like the programs in your state coming together and having a big competition. I don't know. Our director was telling us we haven't done one. We haven't put together a team in a few years. So I don't know. I probably won't, because I'm always too focused on what I'm doing and now, what's in front of me. Like, how do I pass this exam? And unfortunately, I don't know if there's like a sputum bowl for people who are not in school. So I probably won't do it or volunteer for it, but it sounds cool. So I guess if you have the opportunity, definitely do it. It sounds like it should be a lot of fun. And then the last presenter was actually a former student, someone who literally just graduated like in 2015. And they invited her to speak just on behalf of, I guess, someone more relatable to students. She's like, hey, I just graduated, and what she did, so she graduated from a program in my town, not the program I'm a part of, but the other program in town. And just what she went through initially. So, she graduates, she passes her board, she passes her clinical simulation exams, and then poking around, like, she had expectations, like where she wanted to work and desires, things like that. And where she took a position at one hospital, like in a per diem type position. It's not the hospital she wanted to work at, but it was the one job that she kind of got offered right away. And how she took her experience there, then got offered her position at the place she really wanted to work, so she got to go over there and do that for a little while. And then now she'd actually transferred to another city north of here for a full time. So because she went from per diem to per diem in her dream position, kind of waiting around for a full-time slot, and then wound up taking a full-time slot north of here just in her short time. She's like, it's amazing to think that there are physicians who are like, well, what's your take on this patient in this condition as far as pulmonary status goes, and how you really do run into all those things your instructors kind of tell you about, like properly prepping for physicians to rely on you to kind of give a baseline, like, well, this and this and this and this about this patient, I think maybe we should try this intervention or this treatment or whatever. And the physician can be like, yeah, okay, that sounds great to me, because obviously the physician's going to have to make an order for something that you might suggest if it's not within protocol, which, again, protocol really is just a standing order based on a set of parameters. So, she was trying to talk about that, and so now she's up there, and she's also a part of their newly formed vascular access team. So as someone who's only just graduated in 2015, and now she's a part of the developing vascular access team, and has physicians confiding in her, it's a short amount of time, it shows how much you may be relied on in your career. So, and how fast a career can change or progress. So she was really nervous. Wasn't a really good public speaker, but the experience stood. Her story stuck. And so I think she did a really good job. And so it was a real practical presentation that she was able to give. So then that pretty much summed up the conference. At that point, it was a little early, and we all basically left and headed back down home. So I would definitely say, if you have an opportunity to attend your state's student conference, assuming they do something like that. This was like the 7th student conference that the state society had done, and it's gotten bigger every year from what I hear. So I recommend it. If they're not like killing you for like $50, if it's like $25 or less, definitely do it. You can network a little bit. You have the opportunity to maybe meet directors. You never know. Even just someone who maybe, you never know if someone from another city maybe is already an employee of a hospital somewhere, and you have the opportunity to get to know somebody, and then that maybe get you a job. You never know. It's like networking, which was kind of a big focal point of the whole thing, like networking is so important. So I definitely recommend going to one, not necessarily dedicate yourself to going to all of them, but I liked the experience. I thought it was really good. And then again, I have the opportunity this summer to go to the summer forum for AARC. So it's actually in my town this year. It's down at a resort in the other town. It's a 3-day event. We're basically required to go to one day. We're being forgiven a day of clinicals over our summer rotation to go to the conference. So we're getting out of 12 hours of a clinical rotation to do the 8-hour conference. It's like a Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. I'm thinking about maybe like putting a request in to work off and maybe going that Sunday also, because this is an opportunity to do a ton of vendors and getting to see different people speak and really get a taste of what like a full-blown AARC conference is like. And then that Tuesday, because it kind of falls in the last week of clinicals, so I'll probably not go on Tuesday, because he did tell us he would, if we really wanted to go Tuesday, he would give us the credit for clinical hours that Tuesday if we want to go to the conference. But I figured being that late, we'll probably have stuff to finish up. I don't know at what point we have to present case study and things like that, so probably wrap our stuff up in clinicals that week. But I'd like to go at least 2 of the 3 days. I think it'd be a really good experience. So yeah, if you've been to a student conference or you've been to a full-blown AARC conference and you have any stories, definitely comment. I'd be curious to see what your experience was like. If you thought things were useful, things weren't useful. Like I said, I think the big thing is experience was really cool. Was this the most useful thing? you know, I don't know, not necessarily. I'm a little older, I guess, from your average student. So, I mean, I've written more than a few resumes. I've interviewed for more than a few jobs. I'm fairly confident in those capacities. But definitely, guys, I guess a quick shout out. I just hit 180 subscribers. So that's a big deal to me. You know, respiratory therapy is a really small field. 180 people have taken the time to be like, yo, we like what you're doing. So I really appreciate all the subscribes I've gotten. The views, the likes, the comments, guys, keep them coming. I love having conversations with other students or other practitioners. It's definitely keep me going. I know I hit some dry spells there. Second semester is supposed to be the hardest semester I face, and I'm rocking right now. So apologies to everyone for some of that dead time I've had. I've been trying to pick up the pace on these videos, as you probably noticed, and just keep them going. And again, just big thanks to everyone who subscribes, who likes, who comments, who views. I really do appreciate it. And definitely, let's keep it going. Good luck to everyone who's working on finals and all that good stuff right now. I wish everyone prosperity, all A's, and all the ABGs you can handle in clinical. All right, everyone, take care. Have a good one. I'll talk to you guys soon.